Sophie and the Ark of Emonglia. Chapter 3. Time Flies in Eternity. The light that had carried them from the meadow of contemplation faded, releasing Sophie and Max onto a patch of soft, mossy ground. Sophie blinked, taking in their new surroundings. A hidden clearing amidst a thicket of weeping willows, their flowing silver branches swaying gently over a bubbling creek. At the center of the clearing rose a magnificent throne of ancient, gnarled roots. Upon it sat a creature unlike any Sophie had ever seen. It was a wombat, stout and formidable, with rugged brown fur, large claws, and a presence that exuded quiet authority. But most striking were its eyes, bright and otherworldly, like two laser beams, resting on Sophie and Max with a knowing and steady gaze. "I am the Wise Wombat," the creature announced, "messenger of virtue, wisdom." "Don't be daft," Max scoffed, his tail wagging lazily. "Since when do wise and marsupial mingle in the same sentence?" He eyed the wombat skeptically. But his posture was relaxed. He clearly didn't consider their unexpected visitor a threat. "Doubt is the veil through which truth must first be seen," the wombat replied cryptically, turning its gaze to Sophie. "You called for guidance, and wisdom comes to those who seek it." "Is wisdom here?" Sophie asked, curiously scanning the clearing. The wombat's eyes burned a shade brighter. "Wisdom is not something to find. It is something to become. It grows from within, not from without. Allow me to offer some guidance." The wombat clapped its paws, and 3 large stones shimmered into existence at the base of the throne, one white, one grey, and one black, their smooth surfaces glimmering under the light of the wombat's gaze. "What is it that you seek to know?" "Well, it's complicated," Sophie hesitated, reluctant to divulge too much about their middle-of-the-night abduction and the missing ark. "In which case," the wombat said, pointing to the grey stone, "we use this one. Complicated matters are rarely black and white." It reached into its fur and pulled out a purple lotus flower, which it placed upside down on its head. "Please, proceed," it said matter-of-factly, as though the bizarre head covering was entirely context-appropriate. "The fascinator is topsy-turvy," Max noted with a grin. "That is a matter of perception," the wombat replied evenly. "Perhaps you're simply looking at it wrong." "Is there more than one way to look at a fascinator?" Max mused, twisting sideways as if to test the theory. "Indeed," the wombat said with a sage nod. "Perception shapes reality. It's not the object of our gaze that defines our experience, but how we choose to perceive it." The wombat paused, its eyes twinkling as it gestured towards the grey stone. "Now, gaze upon the tablet of wisdom and see what truth is revealed." Suddenly, 4 neat lines of text appeared on its surface, etched in fine black print. "Fate presents no fear. Death presents no worry. Good is easy to obtain. Evil is easy to overcome." Sophie pondered the cryptic message for a moment. "I appreciate the sentiment," she said, frowning, "but this is a bit vague for our very specific predicament." Philosophical abstractions would not help her decide whether or not to stay in Emonglia. "The stone's wisdom is universal," the wombat insisted, leaning forward from its throne. "It applies to all predicaments, generic and specific, old and new. even those that seem most dire." It paused, letting the weight of its words sink in. "For it is not the events themselves that cause us distress, but our perception of them. If you perceive the future to hold abundance, you will not fear scarcity." Sophie nodded slowly. "Like you said earlier, perception is reality." Whatever that meant in practice. It's not like she could just perceive the wombat to be less cryptic, or perceive Christmas to be wholesome and fun again, the way it used to be when Mum and Dad were alive. "In other realms," the wombat continued, "perception is bound by time. Time's relentless current alters all, but here, in Emonglia, time holds no sway. You command the power to shape reality with perception alone." Sophie's eyes widened. "Wait, are you saying time doesn't exist in Emonglia?" "Precisely," the wombat nodded. "Time, as you understand it, requires matter to exist. Here, time simply doesn't matter," it chuckled. "We measure our existence not in hours or years, but in experiences, free from the tyranny of the clock. One might even say, we have no time for time." The furry philosopher seemed particularly pleased with its latest abstraction. A sudden realization struck Sophie. "So, hypothetically," she stammered, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and apprehension, "if time is always now in Emonglia, one could travel to Earth and arrive, say, 5 years ago?" Her mind lit up at the thought of seeing her mum and dad again. "Whenever you wish," the wombat replied. "Past, present, and future are all intertwined in the arc." "What's the arc got to do with it?" Sophie asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. The wombat fell silent for a moment, as if debating whether or not to tell her. "Without the arc," it said, its voice low and serious, "you would have no control over when you arrive to Earth." Blood rushed to Sophie's face. Rationality was going to simply toss her into the time whirlpool, with no regard for her safety. That turtle cocoa pan was as good as a death sentence. She could have emerged in the Dark Ages, or some apocalyptic future. It was a complete time lottery. Worse, she would be separated from Max forever. Her hands clenched, nails digging into her palms. They had to find the arc. "How do I wield perception?" she asked, resolute. "Tell me too," Max woofed, squinting at the wombat's upside-down lotus flower, as if willing it the right way up. The wombat chuckled softly. "If you want to experience change, you must first choose to change your experience. Perceive what you want, not what you fear." "It's not that simple," Sophie said, anger relenting to a deep wave of sadness. Her parents were never coming back, regardless of how much she wanted them to. The wombat's gaze held her firmly. "Positive feelings come from within. You seek happiness, yet you cling to anxiety. You long for peace, yet make grief your mainstay. There are no emotions here, Sophie, only your feelings. It's all in your head." The wombat tapped its paw on the upside-down lotus flower. "Huh," she muttered pensively. "You're right." The ghouls of fear and confusion were out of sight, long gone, yet her mind was still reeling through an unending loop of worries and what-ifs. Suddenly, a memory resurfaced. Her mother's voice, gentle but firm, echoing in her mind. "Every great journey begins with a stumble." Sophie had never understood what she meant. Until now. Emonglia, quite literally, was her stumble. the beginning of something great.
Look, that fascinator's back upright, Max exclaimed, pawing playfully at the wombat's head.
Excellent, the wombat announced. My work here is done. I shall let you get back to the meadow of contemplation. Before Sophie could so much as utter a word, the air around them shimmered. A golden light burst forth from the ground, spiraling upward like a whirlwind. She gripped Max's collar as the ground fell away and the world around them blurred. Nice fellow, Max muttered. Not sure how it knew thy name, though. Sophie blinked at the fading outline of the wombat. How could it? We never introduced ourselves. And then the wombat's words flashed before her mind. There are no emotions here, Sophie. Only your feelings. It's all in your head.
Like and subscribe to join the adventure, and check out the links below for more magic.